At the dead hour before dawn, when the prairie wind cut like a blade and the train station stood abandoned but for drifting snow, he saw her collapse beside the iron bench, a dark shape swallowed by frost. And in that instant, the millionaire cowboy knew the night meant to kill someone. He had come only to sign freight papers in secret, his wealth hidden under dust and a battered coat. But the scream tore from his chest as he ran, boots slipping, hands burning, finding a woman frozen stiff with fear, her breath rattling like broken glass, her nurse's bag soaked through, blood crusted on her sleeve, and the rails howling as if a train would never come. And as he dragged her into the lamplight, he felt eyes watching from the snowbanks. A rumor given teeth because this station had swallowed men before. She tried to fight him, whispering that the last train lied, that someone pushed her, that the cold was kinder than what followed. And when he wrapped his coat around her and lifted her, he felt a tremor under the calm he wore like armor, a vow made long ago to never care again, cracking as her pulse fluttered. And the wind carried a name he hadn't spoken since he bought half the county, a name tied to a ledger burned and a brother buried. And as he staggered toward the telegraph office, the lamp went out, plunging them into black, and a boot scraped close behind, and a hand brushed his shoulder, and a voice breathed that the nurse was not meant to survive the night. And the cowboy turned, heart hammering, knowing his money could not buy heat, time, or mercy, only a choice that would stain the frontier. And he made it, swinging with bare knuckles into the dark, feeling bone give, hearing a body fall, and running again, lungs aflame, while the woman clung to him and whispered that if she lived, she would tell the truth about the men who owned the trains, the town, and the graves beneath the snow. He kicked the telegraph door until the lock split, hauled her inside and struck a match that flared and died, revealing claw marks on the wall and a timetable altered by hand. And she gasped that the nurses had been warned not to travel alone, that a charity train was a trap to cull witnesses to a land theft, written in ink and blood. And as he built a fire from ledgers and broken chairs, he confessed without meaning to that he owned the line now, that he had bought it to bury the past, that his brother had been crushed between couplers after refusing to sign away. A valley. And she stared at him with fever-bright eyes and said the past had teeth, that the men who pushed her wore his brand on their cuffs. And outside the snow shifted again, a shadow pacing and a rifle cracked, shattering glass, splinters biting his cheek as he threw himself over her, feeling heat bloom and knowing he was bleeding, knowing the night would not forgive them. And when the fire caught at last, the room filled with smoke and truth, her, shaking, slowing under his hands as he warmed her, counted breaths, and decided that if she lived, he would tear the frontier open and let the lies freeze to death, even if his name burned with them. And as the shadow withdrew to reload, he barred the door, braced it with the bench, and whispered that dawn was a promise he intended to keep. Though the clock had stopped and the cold pressed close like a judge, she laughed once, thin and sharp, and said dawn was a rumor too, but she believed him anyway. And when the telegraph finally sparked alive under his fingers and sent a single word down the wire, help, the line went dead with a hiss like laughter, and the footsteps returned, circling, patient. And he checked the revolver he hated to carry, counting 3 rounds, counting heartbeats, and the fire settled into a glow that painted them gold and made a stranger of him, a man choosing to be seen. Outside, the wind paused as if listening, and somewhere far down the track steel sang, a promise or a threat, and he smiled into it. Tonight, wait. The rifle barked again, and the door shuddered, a plank splitting as the bullet bit deep. And the cowboy felt the room shrink until only the nurse's breath mattered, counted against his palm as he pressed cloth to his side and tasted iron, smoke curling low while the fire hissed. And he dragged the bench tighter, thinking of angles, of men who hunted with patience and knew stations like maps of bones. She stirred and caught his wrist, eyes clearing just enough to warn him that the men outside would not rush, that they would wait for cold and blood to finish what bullets began. And when he told her dawn was close, she smiled like someone who had seen clocks lie, confessing that her name was Eliza. Ward and she had followed, wounded migrants along the line, recording names the company erased, and that tonight she carried proof that her valley was poisoned, its wells fouled to force, families off land sold cheap to men with clean hands and dirty ledgers, and his jaw tightened because the poison was his, a cost buried in contracts he never read, signed by agents who wore his trust like a mask. The footsteps scraped, a cough answered, and a voice called his childhood nickname through the door, friendly as prayer, promising warmth if he handed her over. And he felt the old reflex to bargain rise and die, replaced by a quiet fury as he kicked the stove to roar brighter, smoke thickening, and pulled the telegraph battery free to rig a spark trap on the handle, his fingers steady despite the ache, while Eliza crawled to the window and tore strips from her skirt to bandage him, her hands competent, gentle, and when he asked why she trusted him, she said because he stayed when he could have fled, because he listened, and because the men who pushed her never looked at her like a person. The handle rattled and he stepped back. Gun up, the spark snapping blue as a hand seized,